Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me typically would be the man himself from the great state of Texas, Mr. Michael Becker, but unfortunately he's on another due diligence assignment. So joining me today is the professor, Mr. James Eng. James, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Paul.
So James, tell us a little bit about what's coming up in the Old Capital world. What can people expect?
Yeah, we just wrapped up a couple of events traveling around the place in the U.S. So we have two, I would say, big events. We've got our Old Capital field trip, our DFW field trip, April 17th and 18th here in Dallas, where we put 50, 60 people on a bus and show them some of the stuff that we're seeing out there, deals that we financed. And then on April 25th, we have our, not basketball, not bowling, but pickleball tournament. So we have our charity tournament. We're hoping not as many injured ankles and wrists and all that come with playing basketball. So if you go over to oldcapitalpodcast.com and you can register for those upcoming events.
The basketball tournament that we had for several years which was a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. And some of these 40 and 50-year-old guys, and there was some gals in there too, but 40 or 50-year-old guys thought that they were 22 or 23 years old, and they would be very aggressive, almost too aggressive, that people would get injured. So that was never good. And so we've changed it up to being a little bit lighter. And we're looking forward to having you come out and join us for the pickleball tournament coming up here in April. And again, what's that money going to be used for, James?
Yeah, so we support a nonprofit here in Dallas called City House. It basically helps with kids, teenagers who are going through homelessness or a tough family situation. They basically provide shelter and food and sort of get them back into schools. And then once they're sort of 18 and full functioning adults, they go back out into the world. So it's a great cause.
That's great. Thanks very much for putting that together, James, and that the team over at Old Capital. So today in the podcast, we really wanted you to meet somebody, introduce you to somebody that we felt was interesting. And so James and I were out at the National Multifamily Housing Council meeting out in San Diego a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know how this happened, but we just ran into somebody that I thought was a character that I thought was intriguing, somebody that I thought you would want us to listen to and spend some time with. And his name is Brian Truman, and Brian is with Sperry Van Ness in the Middle Tennessee, Nashville area, out of an area that is just an up-and-coming area. So I wanted to spend some time with Brian and kind of talk a little bit about his success. And as you know, we do a lot of business in the state of Texas. Everybody's looking for opportunities outside of their normal area. So I wanted to bring Brian on the podcast, talk a little bit more about what he does and his success in that neck of the woods. James, how did we get to meet Brian Truman?
Yeah, so we were at NMHC and we sort of had our flag out there and at the Old Capital booth, and there's probably 1,000 people that walk by you and 1,000 people sit next to you and 1,000 hands shaking and a lot of conversations had. And so Brian, sort of came from a different perspective, I thought, and gave us some perspective and did a lot of interesting things. So Brian, maybe to kick it off, let's just get right into it. Brian, maybe give them a little bit brief background on yourself and sort of what you guys do.
All right. Thank you, man. Appreciate having you on, and kudos to the pickleball that you're doing and the charity. We love that. We do a couple of events here every month, and we always have charity sponsors for our events because we're big on our whole motto for our events is that we want to help you increase your standard of living so you can increase your standard of giving. So I love your concept. So getting into your question, yeah. So I do basically nothing but multifamily here in the Nashville and Tennessee area, and have for like the last 8 years. Overall, as a brokerage, we work in all segments of commercial, but myself, I do nothing but help people buy and sell multifamily. So I work with buyers and sellers, both probably about equally. And I love it. Love helping people create generational wealth that then they can pass down to their kids or families or charities or wherever they want to put that money. So.
And then just real quick, so before multifamily, what did you do? Were you in the space, in the multifamily space, or were you doing something else?
No, great question. I spent 22 years in government contracting, and then when I chose to leave that career, I started a business brokerage from scratch here in Nashville. That was back in 2011. Grew it to be the largest one in Nashville by 2016, and had somebody approach me about buying it. So we, as I would tell people, hey, my business is always for sale for the right price. So I ended up signing ownership of that over, and that was 2016. And then went to work in real estate and basically been doing multifamily ever since. My wife is a broker, commercial broker. Before that, she was a commercial real estate appraiser. So on the evaluation side, so we kind of have everything covered.
So every night you're talking NOI and cap rate.
Yeah.
At the dinner table.
Well, that is funny, but and my brain is going real estate and cap rates and NOIs and multifamily 24. Hers not so much. So our ride homes is if it's 7:00, it's hey Brian, offers hours are over. No more.
Right. So I guess the 8 years, I mean, I've been at Old Capital about 9 years. Tell us sort of what has happened in Nashville. I mean, in terms of multifamily, like who are the buyers back then versus buyers now? What have you seen over that time?
Early on, the buyers were more just local. But as most people know, Nashville is absolutely blown up. And, and so now Nashville is a very, very hot market. So we went from dealing mainly with local buyers to now we deal with large syndications from all over the country. So we probably dealt with 75% of local people back when I first, got started. Maybe 25% were out of state. And now that is just complete opposite. Probably 75% of the people we deal with now, companies, syndications, private equity companies, everything, they're all from out of state.
And then, so right now, maybe give people an idea. I mean, I know 23 was a little bit lighter for a lot of groups, but sort of 21, 22, 23, sort of average deal size and volume that you were transacting on an annual basis, just to give people an idea of size.
Yeah, so we kind of pride ourselves and really specialize in properties of about 150 and under. There's a lot of companies that deal in the 200 and 250 or 300 and up. We have found great success in dealing with 150 and under, right? So yeah, 2021 and 22 were just crazy. We were doing like 50 transactions a year, and now even in 23, when a lot of people here in Nashville, a lot of brokerages really struggled to sell anything. Even last year, we still sold like 15 properties. But I think and equate that success to the fact that we deal in the 150 and under, but also part of that success is that we don't just do the Nashville core, the downtown area, but we deal in a lot of the tertiary markets, and we've had great success in those markets. And we do a lot of research into those markets. And what I mean by research is that we will go and sit down with the economic development directors in those cities and those counties that surround Nashville and talk to them about, hey, what's coming, what's going on, right? So that way we can educate our clients to say, you know what, yeah, this is not a core property that's in the core, but here's a property where we think you really need to take a look at, and here's why, and here's what's happening, and here's what's coming, the businesses and all that. So, I think that is just has really helped us have a lot of success, especially like last year when we had some brokerages, some of our competing brokerages, they might have sold 2 or 3 properties all year long, and that was it.
It's crazy. And I want to come back to some of these secondary markets. I would think of Murfreesboro or Clarksville or Lexington or Versailles or Louisville or even Franklin, all around that rolling hills area of Kentucky and Tennessee and that area. But I really want to talk a little bit about success. And in your success, you had kind of incidents right from the beginning. I would call that maybe an initial trigger of success. Can we kind of talk about that story you told us out in San Diego about getting the call? Was it right before Christmas? Or
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I thought that was a good story.
Yeah. I think everybody has one of those, stories of, man, how did you really get into multifamily and only doing multifamily, and what really jump started your success? And the story I was mentioning to you was I got my license in like November, and the Saturday before Christmas, so basically a month later, my wife and I are getting ready to go out to dinner, 6:30 at night, remember, and it was on a Saturday. And my phone rings, and I thought, man, do I want to answer this? It was just, it had an area code, didn't have anybody's name to it. And I thought, you know what the heck? I'm going to go ahead and answer it. So I answered the call, and the gentleman came on and he's like, hey, Brian, my name's such and such, and you don't know me, but I got your name from a residential agent who said you might be able to help me. I'm looking for some multifamily properties, but I'm in a real pickle. And that is, I have until midnight tonight to identify my 3 properties for my 1031 exchange. So, and again, this was 6:30 at night on that Saturday. And I said to him, I was like, wow, okay, you know what? Give me 30 minutes. I'll call you back. So I remembered that in my real estate class was a young man who said, when we got talking and I was telling him I was going to be doing commercial, he said, hey, my stepfather has 5 properties that are multifamily. And so I remembered that. So I called him and I said, hey, Trey, your stepfather has 5 properties. Would he entertain an offer on any one of those, or even 3 of them, anything like that? And so he said to me, well, you know what? Give me 15 minutes. I'll call you back. So he called his stepfather, and then he called me back within about 10 minutes and said, yeah, he's got 3 of them. So I said, well, will you do me a favor and will you text me those addresses? And then I called the client back, he became a client. I called him back and said, yeah, I'm going to text you the addresses for 3 properties. That way you can give them to your 1031 intermediary so you can make your midnight deadline. And the story goes on it goes on with this client is that right after the new year, he flew out to come and do inspections. Well, he flew out private. We went and picked him up. He came off the plane, him, his wife, kids, nanny, a video photographer group. And I was just kind of like, wow, who is this guy exactly? Well, I came to find out him and Grant Cardone were real close. And so everything we did, dinner, everything else was videotaped and all of that. And then we came to find out that he does a big event in California every year. And so a few months later, he was holding that event. He invited us out at that event right before lunch. we were sitting right on the front row, right next to Grant and Elena Cardone. And he got up right before lunch, our client did, and told his rags to riches story of basically how he started with nothing and basically lost everything and had to live in his vehicle and so forth. But then he went through and started investing in real estate. And then he mentioned that he had just purchased some property in Tennessee. And that was because Grant told him that would be a great place for him to go and invest in. So, and he said, yeah, my Nashville realtor is here in the audience. So he said, hey, Brian, why don't you stand up? So I stood up and he basically said, hey, anybody wants to invest in Nashville, this is your guy right here. He knows the properties, he knows the market. This is your guy. And so then within 2 minutes of that, we were breaking for lunch and we were supposed to be having a private lunch with our client and then with Grant and Elena. Well, soon as we broke for lunch, there were people coming, attendees of that conference coming from every which direction. I couldn't get out of the row of where the table where I was sitting. It was classroom style, so I couldn't get out. So I just said to my wife, I was like, hey, why don't you go lunch? I'll answer some questions and then I'll catch up with you. Well, an hour and a half later, I was still standing there answering questions, from all these people. And so we came back from that conference. I came back with probably 100 buyers and never looked back since, right? As I tell people, you walk into my office, I have a board of probably, 150, 200 buyers on that board. But, you talk about a jump start into multifamily. I've never struggled for having buyers.
Wow, it's better to be almost lucky than to be good, and being
exactly
your first 90 days and getting that call and leveraging that into sitting in front of a whole room of people that were potentially all buyers of your. Why Tennessee? Who's buying in Middle Tennessee? Why are people investing in Tennessee?
Great question, and I love to answer this question because I probably get 1-2 calls a week from investors who are saying, hey, everybody's telling us we need to buy in Tennessee. We need to invest in Tennessee, Nashville area, but tell us why do we need to invest there, right? And so I walk them through this and I basically say, okay, when you think of Tennessee, what's the first industry you think of? And most of them always say music. And I'm like, okay, so if I told you music is like number 7, would that shock you? And they're like, yeah, that would really shock us. So I say, okay, if I told you healthcare is by far the largest industry, would that shock you? And they're like, yeah. And so then I just run down like the top 10 industries in Tennessee and in Nashville. And then people go, oh, okay, now I see why we need to be there. And it's because it's the diversity of industries here in Nashville, right? So Nashville and this market is not just tied into 1 or 2 industries. There are a lot of very, very strong industries that continue to keep Nashville, booming. Even today, there's still 85, people a day moving here. You go back into the, 2008 when we had the first kind of crisis, Nashville, the market was down maybe 7-8%, if that much, where a lot of others, were down 25, 30 or more. And so Nashville has always been strong and will continue to be strong with, Oracle coming with 12,000 jobs and Amazon's coming with 5,000. And I mean, you just go through the list of companies. So it's just going to stay strong. But that's what makes Nashville such a hot market. And that's what makes people want to buy here.
Do you think COVID accelerated some of that in terms of population growth coming into Nashville? Or when was the date you got that call?
That was 2016.
2016. So this
Yeah,
was pre-COVID. Okay. And
yeah,
then
but
the
to
market's
your
probably accelerated since then.
yeah, to your
Yeah.
point, COVID absolutely accelerated,
Okay.
because Nashville is a very conservative state. So, when it came to lockdowns and, we're landlord friendly here in this state. So it wasn't like our governor was saying, no, you can't evict people. You can't do, any of that. So yeah, you're right.
So stuff was open in 2020 at the end of 20,
Exactly.
basically. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Nice.
Yep.
And then in terms of the market right now, in let's say in Dallas right now, let's say a C deal is 100 a door, a B deal is 150 a door, and A deal is 200 a door. What's pricing like in Nashville, sort of A, B, and C right now? You can either do per unit or cap rate. Just give people an idea, because a lot of our audience is, they might be in California, but they're buying in Texas. They might be buying in some of these other markets. Just give people a baseline of what they're looking at for Nashville.
Okay. Yeah, if you're looking at the core area for Class A, you're going to be in the 200 per door. And the downtown, that core area, we call it, is you're, back in 2021 on that, you're looking at cap rates of 3, 4. Now you're 5 and 6. You get outside of Nashville a little bit, then you're looking at, anywhere from, 80 to a little over 100 a door for like B and C, type stuff. And you're seeing high 6s, 7s on cap rates, and on some occasions you're getting into the low 8s, for cap rates. So it's definitely gone up. Cap rates have raised since, from last year to even into this year.
Yeah, the movement, no doubt. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I was just going to say everyone's pretty familiar with Nashville, obviously Broadway and the entertainment scene, but a lot of people just are not familiar with some of these smaller towns. We hit upon it initially in the podcast here, kind of a word association game. Tell me a little bit about. Let's go one city at a time. Murfreesboro. What's your take on that town?
Murfreesboro is a great area, great area for multifamily. Very strong.
Okay, Clarksville. Tell me about Clarksville.
Very, very strong. Again, heavy military. Rent growth is pretty much leveled off there right now.
Lexington.
Lexington's a very good area. Very, very strong.
Do you get down to Versailles at all, or Louisville?
Yeah, Louisville, tremendous market and good value.
Now, these two areas that I want to talk about is kind of your back door is Brentwood and Franklin in Tennessee. Just higher end, single family residents. A lot of people that work in the Nashville industry of music. They have their homes in that area. What's your take about that area from Brentwood to Franklin? What's your 2 cents of apartments and affordable housing for apartments in that area?
Yeah. So let me go back one more on the Kentucky market that you just talked about, just for your listeners, is a real strong market right now is Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is like 45 minutes to an hour from Nashville. So, but going on to Brentwood and Franklin, yes, those two cities sit in Williamson County, which is just south of the county south of Nashville. Nashville's in Davidson County. Then you go to Williamson County. Those two markets sit in Williamson County. Williamson County is the 8th most wealthy county in the United States. So, to your point, there's a lot of, which then makes, properties in that market very tough to find, because people don't, current owners don't want to sell the properties in those two areas, from that standpoint. And prices are, even in those, even though it's not the core per se, those prices per door are just like being in the core.
Talk a little bit about who's buying these properties. You said a little bit about 75% are syndicators from outside the area, outside the state buying in. Are they buying stabilized properties? Are they buying value add properties? kind of in your head, maybe the last one or two transactions that you worked on, give me kind of a back of the napkin view for somebody that would want to kind of understand it.
I would say both. There are folks out there, buyers that are looking for the stabilized. So say class B, stabilized, but then you have a lot of folks that are buying C plus type properties. And the other thing we're seeing right now, you're talking about the last couple of transactions is, and I had mentioned to people beginning of this year that I thought, 2024, I just told people hang on to your seat because this is going to be a bit of a wild ride. And the reason I said that is the end of 2023, we were getting a lot of calls, asking about properties, what was coming, things like that. And in my conversations, I was realizing that, because of COVID, there were a lot of investors who just moved off to the side, the sideline, but they were hoarding cash. So they had a lot of dry powder sitting on the sideline. So several of our last closings and a couple of them that we have coming up in 2 weeks, these are people that are paying cash. They're not even going the financing route. We do have, we have a couple of assumable ones, but the others are all just paying cash, which, and just from the fact that somebody has $6 million and they're just going to stroke a check is, in my mind, is a little crazy. But, from the fact that I'm like, wow, you don't want to leverage that. I can't send you over to my folks at Old Capital and let them help you leverage some of that.
In Dallas, what will happen a lot of times is the broker will get a listing and they will, get the seller to sign a exclusive with them or listing agreement. And then they'll put together a package and then get all the financials and everything. And then they will blast it out to their email list. And then they'll do tours for 2 or 3 weeks and then have people do, buyer interview calls and best and final and all that stuff. On your deals, is that the process you're going through? Or are you meeting with buyers more and then going after and getting an idea of what's in their box and then going that direction? Which way are you going? Because it seems like, yeah.
No, I like that question. In fact, I'm speaking tomorrow night to a large investment group here in Nashville, and the topic is building a relationship with brokers. And part of what you just mentioned is one of the things that I talked to them about is that I, as a broker, I love for people to send me their real estate resume. And on that real estate resume, it talks about, their criteria and what they're looking for and what kind of markets and, who's part of their team and all these things to you. Because this goes to your point that you made, James, is that, and this is kind of my passion with multifamily is I can talk to you about any one of my buyers on my board and I can tell you exactly what their buy box is. So to your point, we do list some properties, but we are known as the brokers and the brokerage that has a lot of off-market properties. And, we have the agreements with the sellers and all that, but some of the sellers just don't want their properties listed. But because I know the buy box of my buyers, I can say, you know what, this property meets the buy box of these 5 or 6 exactly. And in fact, we will get calls from the other brokers in town who are like, hey, Brian, I know you got a bunch of off-market properties. What do you got? Right. Because, and a lot of them tell me you ought to be putting these out there because, man, you'd get a lot more buyers. But I kind of go back to that first story is I don't necessarily need more buyers, from that standpoint. So I don't know if that answers your question, but, we don't list as many properties as probably I know as our competitors do, but we just know what properties fit who and we'll get them those properties to take a look at.
Yeah. I mean, right now, in 21 and 22, let's say January, February of 21 and 22, there was probably like 50 deals on the market listed officially in DFW. Like that's how much transaction volume was going on. And then, the next month it would be another 50. And the deals would just keep moving on and on. But now it's significantly slower. And there's not as many deals on the market. And so a lot of deals are getting done off market in that the broker gets a call and says, look, I've got an interest rate cap, or I've got a maturity, I've got this issue. And you don't have 3 weeks to make a package. You don't have another 2 weeks to go through best and finals. Yeah. It's like, this guy's got to go, and you've got your board of buyers ready to go, and you know exactly what they're looking for, and they're going to close. So maybe talk about that piece of it. Like, what are some of those key things that are in that box in terms of buyer box? And then how do you get comfortable with that guy can close, besides he already has the $6 million in the bank?
Yeah. Well, that kind of goes back to what I mentioned on the real estate resume that I was talking about.
Yep.
It's kind of like, I talk to them and I have them send me, what properties do you own? Where do you own them? Right? All of that, in the markets. And that, so a lot of what that will tell me, and in my conversations with them, and then if they have who is on your team, a lot of those names I'll recognize. Right. And I'll recognize whether they're, closers or not. And I will tell them when I'm talking to them of why I want the real estate resume and what I'm going to use it for. And one of those is because if I'm representing the seller, part of my, fiduciary responsibility is to do my best to vet, whoever that buyer is, and, give my recommendation of, do I think these guys are closers? Do I think they are the best ones for you? I mean, I've had sellers who have taken, offers that are, 100,000 lower than maybe, another offer we had, or maybe even I've had one that took 200,000, right? Because I knew this party were closers. Right.
And they're not gonna retrade you by 200,000.
Right. And, and that's part of what, like my talk tomorrow is, I'm going to tell them, that's the other thing I go over. You do not want to have a reputation as a serial retrader, because if you do, I mean, Dallas is a, much larger market than Nashville, but, here, us brokers, even though, we compete, we also talk. Right. Sure. And I tell them, you do not want to get a reputation as a serial retrader, because you might as well move on to another market, because unless you come with cash, there's probably, you're going to have very little chance of having success.
Brian, how many people are on your Sperry Van Ness team at your office? Brentwood?
There's myself, and then I have another gentleman that helps me with multifamily. So there's, all together on our whole team, there's like 14, but there's 2 of us that do nothing but multifamily.
And how many outbound calls will you make a day? So
we encourage all of our agents to do 2 hours of cold calling a day. So we're calling directly to sellers. There's a lot of there's CoStar out there, there's Reonomy, there's Yardi and things like that. But, we use, nothing against my friends at CoStar, but we use Yardi a lot, just because we feel like their data, when it comes to phone numbers for owners, is better.
So you guys have a lot of buyers that want to come into the market itself. A lot of them are out of state. And some of the people that you're talking to are in-state people. Talk to me a little bit about some of the things that you guys do that I think is pretty interesting. Maybe your generational wealth, your business bridges, your learning series, your big one, which is the Accelerate event. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these big events that you do?
Yeah, we do 2 events a month. One of them, there is a investors group here in Nashville that is called Real Estate Investors of Nashville. It's the largest investors group in all of the Southeast, has 2,000 members. and I'm the educational coordinator for multifamily. So the first Thursday of every month, I'm basically hosting that, and I will, as being the facilitator of that, I'm the one that is getting the speakers. I'm the one that's picking the topics, all of that. I interview the whoever I'm having come and speak.
Is it
So
in person or is it virtual?
it's both in person and virtual. And then the second Thursday, we do what we call Accelerate to Generational Wealth, which is our own learning series as well. And again, that one is in person and virtual. So that one we have people that tune in virtually all over the country, whether they're, we'll have people from the state of Washington, Oregon, California, Texas, New York, all over the country that tune in for that one. And we're just big on educating, the community and providing education. And it's all free. That's the other thing. We don't charge for any of these. The only thing we charge for is our big event that we have coming up May 3rd, which is called Accelerate Summit. And we have national speakers that are coming in from all over the country. It's a one-day event from 8 to 5. We have 10 speakers. And
Give me an idea who some of the speakers have been in the past.
Some of the speakers in the past. So Rob Luna, we've had Brad Lee, who does the Dropping Bombs podcast. You may.
Yeah. Did you have Ed Milet too?
That is one. We have Neil Dinga too, who's a branding expert.
Wow.
We've had him. He does teaches people on not only branding, but social content, how to use AI. A lot of those things. He goes around the country doing that. He puts on his own event as well. He puts on the Ford event out in Las Vegas. I went to it in July. It was, there were probably close to 2,000 people at that event. Ours is not that size, and we don't ever anticipate wanting to get to that size.
And then obviously you've looked at, this is I think brokers have a nice, brokers and lenders have sort of an inside track on what they've seen work well. Like a lot of people who listen to this podcast, they might be limited partners, they might be general partners. What are some of the best practices of operators out there that you've seen come in, buy deals in 15, 16, 17, sell some of the deals, but also buy new deals? What are some of the best practices of some of those operators?
I think obviously they have developed a lot of great relationships, not only with lenders such as yourself, but they also, what I've seen when I've taken kind of a deep dive is they have a great package put together, not only on that property, but they themselves as a company. So when they present to Old Capital, right, they're presenting about, this is who we are. Here's this is why, this is the property. This is what we like about it. All the pluses, everything else like that. They are usually extremely strong at raising capital, and especially over the, especially last year, 2023, even 2022, right? It was much harder for people to raise capital. And the ones that come in and can be those closers, get those deals done, are ones that have a real strong team. They have a real strong message that they can portray to the lender, and then they can raise capital.
Yeah, so they're stepping into the market when nobody else is willing to at some point. And then, so my last question is crystal ball from Brian for the next, let's say, 12 months. What are you seeing out there in the market, in your market?
Our market is just, it's like I mentioned, it's a wild ride right now, meaning we have so many people calling, looking for properties, wanting properties. I think they are, kind of seeing, okay, we don't think interest rates are going to go up. And we think maybe towards the end of this year, they're going to maybe start dropping. So there are a lot of people that are looking for property. So for us here in the Nashville area, and that we are we are extremely, extremely busy, which I tell people all the time, I'd rather be busy than bored.
Have you seen any foreclosures hit in your market?
We have not yet,
Okay.
but
All right.
I think they are coming though. We have a lead on a couple of them that are coming.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we've seen maybe Houston's probably had the most,
Yeah.
maybe 4 or 5, like larger in size. Austin and San Antonio, a couple, Dallas, a couple of size. And it's really, same story,
Yeah.
2021, 22 bridge loans that had, some sort of interest rate cap or maturity that came up this year
Right.
already. Yeah.
Yeah, there is one here in Nashville. It's under contract now. It was distressed, but that's about the only one right at the moment. But like I say, there are others coming. We get a good bead on, on those.
So, Brian, before I ask you to give us some information about how people could get in contact with you, we met you out in San Diego with the National Multifamily Home. Do you think that's a good conference to go to if you are a broker? Is that a good conference to go to if you are an investor? Tell me, what was your thoughts about going to NMHC?
I think it's a great conference if you're a broker, from that standpoint, especially, and maybe I'm biased from the standpoint, especially if you're from Nashville, because as I was reaching out to make appointments to visit with owners, I also had people reaching out to me, that were buyers who were going to that conference because I was from Nashville, right? Because there's people who want to be in Nashville, so they're reaching out wanting to meet with me, not as much as I was reaching out for, with the to the owners. But I think if you, as a broker, I think if you work that conference, and maybe I don't know if that's the right terminology, but work it as far as lining up all your appointments and structuring your day to where you have, those appointments and lunches and breakfast and dinners. And, you can easily sit and visit with a good 20 people a day when you're out there.
Well, when we sat and visited with you out in San Diego, we found you to be interesting with a great, comfortable smile. So if somebody wanted to get more information about Brian Truman, what would be the best way for them to get in contact with you?
My email address is Brian, BRIAN Truman, TRUMAN, like Uncle Harry or the Truman Show, at S as in Sam, V, Victor, N, Nancy.com. So Brian.Truman at SVN.com. My phone number is 615-260-2121. And another thing that differentiates myself is I will actually answer your phone call.
I'll remember that on an early Sunday morning. Hey, James, any final thoughts?
No, that's it. I appreciate it coming on, Brian.
You bet. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. On behalf of Brian Truman at Sperry Van Nest in the Nashville area, we certainly do appreciate that. I'm Paul Peebles. That's James Zhang. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.